August in Europe, it is usually the season of dreams. From the lavender fields of Provence to the bustling piazzas of Rome, the continent slows down. It is the time of the grand vacancies, the great vacation. In 2003, the summer arrived with a golden promise. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The sun, a radiant coin, hung high and unmoving. Tourists flocked to the fountains of Paris and the beaches of Spain, basking in the warmth. It felt like a gift, but this gift came with a terrible price. What began as a celebration of sunshine slowly, almost imperceptibly, morphed into a siege. The sun did not set, it merely dimmed. The air did not cool, it stagnated. Europe, the old continent of stone cities and temperate history, was about to be turned into an oven. To understand the tragedy, one must look not at the streets, but at the sky. Meteorologists watched their screens with growing alarm. A massive high-pressure system had parked itself over Western Europe. They call it an omega block, named after the Greek letter it resembles on a chart. Like a giant, invisible lid, it trapped the hot air rising from the Sahara and refused to let it escape. It pushed away the cooling storms from the Atlantic. Day after day, the heat accumulated. Temperatures soared into uncharted territory. 35 degrees, 38 degrees, 40 degrees. In London, for the first time in recorded history, the mercury broke the 100-degree Fahrenheit barrier. But the true killer wasn't the heat of the day, it was the heat of the night. The stone buildings of Europe, designed to retain heat in winter, now became thermal batteries, radiating suffering long after sunset. There was no respite, no sleep, only the sweat and the waiting. Nowhere was the suffering more acute than in France. August represents a sacred silence in French culture. Government officials, doctors, and families leave the cities for the coast. Paris becomes a ghost town of closed shutters and empty boulevards. Left behind were the elderly, the grandmothers and grandfathers living in small, top-floor apartments under zinc roofs that baked in the sun. They were alone. Culturally, air conditioning was seen as an unnecessary luxury, even a health hazard, as the temperature inside these apartments climbed to 45 degrees Celsius. Dehydration set in. It was a silent massacre. They didn't die screaming, they simply faded. They sat in their armchairs, confused, their hearts laboring to cool blood that was becoming too thick to pump. The phone lines were silent. Their children were miles away, unaware that their parents were fighting a losing battle against the air itself. By the second week of August, the denial shattered. The emergency rooms were overwhelmed, not with injuries, but with hyperthermia. The sirens never stopped wailing. But the most horrifying symbol of the 2003 heat wave was found on the outskirts of Paris. The city's morgues were full. The funeral homes had no more space. In a desperate act, authorities requisitioned a giant refrigerated warehouse at the Rungus International Market, usually a place for fresh produce and flowers. Now, it housed rows of coffins. It housed the bodies of the forgotten. When families finally returned from their vacations, they were greeted not by reunions, but by guilt and grief. 15,000 people died in France alone. Across Europe, the death toll would eventually be estimated at over 70,000. It was a natural disaster with the casualty count of a war. While the cities suffocated, the countryside burned. In Portugal, the heat dried the forests into tinder. Massive wildfires erupted, consuming nearly 10% of the country's forests. The sky turned black with smoke, a dark mirror to the relentless sun. Farmers watched helplessly as their crops withered in the fields. The heat wave was not just killing people, it was attacking the very systems that sustained life. In the Alps, a different kind of destruction was taking place. The glaciers, the frozen water towers of Europe, began to weep. They lost 10% of their mass in a single summer. Rockfalls, held together by permafrost for centuries, crumbled, sending boulders crashing down mountainsides. The map of Europe was literally changing shape under the assault of the temperature. The heat finally broke in late August. Storms swept across the continent, washing away the stagnant air. But the scars remained. The 2003 heat wave was a watershed moment. It stripped away the illusion that developed nations were immune to the wrath of nature. It forced a rewrite of public health policies. The Plan Canicule, in France now ensures that never again will the vulnerable be left alone in the heat. But more than that, it was a terrifying glimpse into the future. Scientists looked at the data and saw a pattern. This was not a freak anomaly, it was a prologue. As the planet warns, the summer of 2003 serves as a haunting reminder. We are biological creatures, fragile and dependent on a delicate balance that we are rapidly destabilizing. In a small cafe in Paris, an old man sits alone. Across from him is an empty chair. He sips his water, watching the tourists return, watching the leaves turn brown. He remembers the silence of that August. He remembers the heat that felt like a physical weight. The catastrophe of 2003 is recorded in history books as statistics, charts, and meteorological diagrams, but for those who lived through it, it is remembered differently. It is remembered in the stillness of a hot room, in the sound of a siren in the distance, and in the empty spaces left behind by those who vanished into the furnace of the endless summer.